All right, hello everyone and welcome on this Saturday. We'll be getting going here in just a minute. I'm just printing the last bit of the slides, put a hole punch in it, and then we'll rock and roll. I'm looking at your questions now, and today we'll be going over VORs. Then we'll be getting into the wonderful world of aviation weather. We'll do a little bit deeper dive on the METARs and the TAFs, and we'll open up for questions that you may or may not have at that point, okay? And we've got Zaf with us and Missy with us, so they're here answering questions as well. So we'll get going in just a few minutes. We can do the HSI, Scott. Depends on, I'll see what the simulator offers, but we're going to use the simulator today so that way I can demonstrate what we're actually looking at. All right, hello everybody, welcome. And if you have specific questions on VORs or like question number 7, Patrick, if you can just throw it in the chat what the actual question is, it's going to be easier for us to take a look at. We'll look at a few VOR questions as well, and we'll go into depth about VORs. Just have like 5 more pages to print here. Robert, email address is david@checkride-prep.com. I'm going to be going through the emails later today. All right, let's see. There we go. All right, welcome everyone to this Saturday. Appreciate everyone for showing up here. Just had to print some last-minute slides for us that we're going to be going over today. So I hope everyone's having a great weekend so far, and I'm sure there are some questions that we have over the last week. What I'm going to be doing after this class is I will have open office hours on Facebook. So if you have any additional questions that we can't get to today, I'll be hanging out on the Facebook group for most of the rest of the day and working on the emails that seem to be piling up. I can only do about 75 emails an hour is what I've averaged as my best responses. But for some reason, you guys send more than 75 emails per hour. So the pile just kind of incrementally goes up rather than down, unfortunately. But other than that, let's go ahead and take a look at what we're doing today. So actually today is the 8th, not the 1st. I missed that. But we'll talk about the course updates just like anything else. The only real course update I have is I'm just pushing back the private pilot. We're supposed to be talking about the private pilot, you know, what it is to become a private pilot and the course introduction, if you will. That's just going to be pushed back. I'm going to offer it Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday of next week just so I can finish out these emails and finish this course here. Once we're done with this course, I'll have a lot more time to answer questions. So we'll talk about that. In addition to that, we'll cover the VOR navigation. I will show you the simulator and step-by-step how to do that. We'll talk about METARs and TAF review. We'll go over a few of the questions, but the questions are primarily going to be concerned relating to either VORs or the METARs or the TAFs. And we'll go through all of the potential METAR and TAF questions today so you can see all of them. And then we'll keep it open for just any generalized questions that you guys have, so we can basically talk about that as well. Other than that, most of you are already in the private pilot course, which is ending this week. So congratulations for making it 3 out of the 4 weeks. There's almost there, 25% of the class left. Today at 4 o'clock, we were supposed to do the, as mentioned, it was like the intro to private pilot course or introduction to what a private pilot license is. I'm just going to push that back until Thursday and then Saturday and Sunday of next week, and I'll update that on Facebook. So that way, that'll give me some more time to catch up on these emails and kind of, keep us on track with the school here. In addition to that, we do have the Commercial Pilot Ground School, which is going to start at the very, very end of August. It's going to be 7 classes, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If you know anyone that's interested, that's a free class. In addition to that, we have the Instrument Pilot Ground School that will be on September 21st through October 16th. We usually send out announcements for that one. And then we start, that's basically going to be the same schedule as per usual. So Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 5 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Pacific time on all of those. The CFI school will provide more information when that comes out. That'll be in November and December. So that'll be the CFI and the II. And we can kind of go from there in terms of that. So got something cool in the mail today. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this before. Let's see if this thing will come in. You guys know what that is? Nice little prop. This is actually an old KLM door from the 747, and it's actually the crew hatch, the emergency crew hatch. So someone found it for me, and the thing weighs like 40 pounds, but it's kind of cool. Anyways, with that, as you guys know, we do offer 2 different options if you guys want lifetime access, and that'll be carried through the 19th, which is the last day of our class. After that, it basically goes back to the monthly payment plans. So we basically have $97 if you want just the private pilot ground school and the private pilot oral prep course, and or you can split that over 3 months. You get immediate access no matter what. In addition to that, you have the definitive guide to becoming a private pilot. So like I said, that will get sent out this weekend. That is actually this thing right here. It's about 130 pages that I'm finishing up editing. That's what I've been doing almost all night here. Other than that, you also get the 20% off the coupons for the t-shirts. So I'll post the t-shirts over this weekend. For those that wanted to upgrade to the higher plan, which is only $30 more, that email will go out later today as well. So that's basically the same thing, except the only primary difference that you're going to have is it's $30 more, but you get the instrument ground school. In addition to that, you get the private, you get all the private pilot stuff, but you get the commercial ground school, and that comes out, the 4-flight course, and the commercial drone as well. So in the event, if you have the lifetime membership, Eric, or anyone else out there, you can basically take it at your leisure. There's no requirement to finish it by the 19th. So for everybody else, we basically pull the course down, right? So that's basically how that works. Once again, either one of those you can split in 3 monthly payments just to make it really easy for everybody. Okay. All right. So with that, I said that we'll cover study tips. You guys have seen this slide before, so let's go ahead and take a look at it again. For the private pilot, I saw a bunch of questions on this last time before we were finishing. So with the private pilot, if you go in the very, very back of the ACS, what you have is you're going to have these guys right here. So what we're going to probably most of us are going to end up taking is this private pilot airplane. It's called a PAR, which is the testing code. The number of questions is 60 questions. You have to be 15 years old. 2.5 hours is allotted for you to take the test, and you have to get a 70%. Now, this is the official FAA exam. Now, the other thing that people keep asking is, what is the percentage of questions? So on the bottom left there, this is the percentage of questions potential out of the 60 questions that you're given. So, for example, if we look at the first line, it says regulations 5 to 15%. So, part of those 60 questions, you're going to get regulations somewhere between 5 to 15% of the total questions available to you. All right. The biggest one that you'll notice here is pretty much going to be either the regulation section, the safe and efficient operations, which is basically safety related. We talk about that on the very last class on next Friday. And then everything else is between 5 to 10%. All right. So that's how that breaks down. Once again, my recommendation to everyone is to, keep taking those practice tests over and over and over. That's kind of your best way of kind of getting through the exam fairly quickly. And you can even go back to lesson number 1, for example, and just take the aerodynamics over and over and over until you're getting 90 to 100%, and then go to lesson 2, lesson 3, lesson 4, and so forth. By the time you get to the final lesson or the final exam, the practice exam, you would have already gone through about 600 to 700 test questions, and you'll be all set for that. Once you take the actual final exam with us, what I recommend is, even if you pass it once, take it again within about a 24 to 48 hour period. If you can get 80% or higher on both of those exams, then I would go ahead and schedule your FAA written as soon as possible, just to kind of knock that out and get that done for you. Now, the other thing I'll also mention is that the FAA testing supplement, the reason why I say it's your friend and you want to become familiar with it is occasionally there are questions in here that it does ask about, the different types of airspace or identification of different, certain things within the question. The first 20 pages, which is appendix number 1, is all of the different legends that can actually help you identify airspace, different things on the sectional charts, different things in the chart supplement. So all of these things could potentially help you. So that's the reason why it's good to become familiar with it. The test question will generally say refer to figure number 25, but if you refer to figure 25, it's still not going to say, well, refer to the appendix 1 for additional information, such as the legends. You're just going to have to know that the legends exist, and it's worthwhile to look at what the legends include. As mentioned, it's going to give you the sectional legends, so it'll give you everything that's on the aeronautical chart. And in addition to that, it will give you the legend for the chart supplement guide. So that's the green book that we have as well. So make use of the Facebook group as well. I see a lot of people using that, which is fantastic. You guys are answering each other's questions. I am having to interject very, very little because you guys actually answer it faster than I do. So that's fantastic. And then I know that the private pilot class is also using Discord. So you can always join that group as well. And you can usually get the answer. And then also you've got all of the mods here. You've got Missy, Tom, and Zaf here. I think Maddie's out for the weekend. So you can always answer or ask those questions, and they're happy to help as well. All right. So that is my 2 cents on the study tips. That's kind of your best way of getting through it. Remember, you don't need to know everything when it comes to any one of these classes. You're not going to be an expert by the end of the day. At the end of the day, though, once you pass the exam, you can go sit there and memorize it word for word, the Federal Aviation regulations and everything else. But some people who are perfectionists, I know you're out there. We all want to be, we're type A personalities. We want to know everything going into the test. And, the reality is that if we really studied and buckled down and try to get to know everything, it'd probably be 6 months or so before we're ready to take this thing. All right. So do yourself a favor, just get through the practice test. If you can get 80s and 90s or higher, then you're good to go. Take it. Once you take your actual FAA test, then you've got unlimited amount of time to study as much or as in depth that you want. Okay. All right. So today what we're going to be doing, as mentioned, is we're going to be using the VOR simulator. For those of you, I gave this link in previous classes and also the class the other day. So this is the Luz Montero, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, .com. They have several different simulators available, but it basically looks like this when you pull it up. Make sure if you are using it, you have Flash enabled. For most of us that are using Chrome, I don't know, at least I use Chrome a lot. There's usually like a little lock in the corner there or a little info button. If you click on it to the left of the web address, what will end up happening is that will allow you to enable basically the Flash for it. The thing that we're primarily going to be paying attention to today, though, is I will kind of go through this real briefly. Our airplane, as it relates to the VOR, is right there on the left-hand side. And then obviously our VOR is this guy right there. So we are going to be using a VOR DME. And the thing is that this kind of allows us to look at it in a 2D environment, basically a top-down view, if you will. And the things that we're going to pay attention to is we're obviously going to be using our VOR in the center. And you'll see me basically spinning the OBS right there. So that's basically going to spin the movable compass card at the top, right, and left. And that will then change the to and the from indication. The other thing that we'll also be paying attention to is in the very bottom here, this is the DME. Looks like a football playbook. Let me see if I can clean that up a little bit. Down here, this is the DME. So as you can see in this snapshot, this is 9.8 nautical miles from the VOR. So obviously, a lot of times people ask, well, am I going to the VOR or am I going away from the VOR? Well, if the number gets higher in terms of your miles are getting higher, you're running away from the VOR, okay? If it's getting smaller, then what's going to end up happening is we're obviously going to the VOR. Now, I'm going to show you how to track and intercept a VOR, and I'll also show you how to go direct to a VOR. So in the event, I'm going to basically point the nose of the airplane, probably going in a different direction, completely away from the VOR, and I'll show you how to then track directly going to the VOR, okay? After that, we'll also look at reverse sensing, and I'll describe why, when we're going to a VOR, we don't want to have a from indication. So anytime we're tracking to a VOR, we're actually tracking a bearing, and anytime we're going away from a VOR, we're tracking a radial. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Now, if you want to practice this on your own, there's obviously keyboard commands. Majority of what you would use is in this green sector, WASD. And then if you wanted to increase your speed, it's basically K and M, but just try to follow along. You don't need to do it simultaneously. Otherwise, you're going to miss the concepts that we're going to be talking about today. All right. The other thing too is that we will basically try to show you, how the needle will move right and left of the center of the donut. And remember, once it kind of touches that donut, that is when we are going to start to make our turn inbound. But those would be the primary things that I want you to pay attention to. Other things that we're really not, the things that we're primarily going to use today are going to be the VOR and also the heading indicator or the DG. Everything else we don't really need. We don't need the turn coordinator, the airspeed indicator, or anything else. It's just the concept of how these instruments work, all right? So that's what we're going to be covering today in the first part. The second part, we'll be going through the aviation weather. So with that, before I forget, I'll share the METAR and TAF decoder as well that some of you already have. You can look at that, download that, and we'll be using that for the second half as we continue along. All right, so let's just do a brief review of VORs. So remember, VORs, if you want to think about them, they're kind of like bicycle spokes. So at the center is where the VOR lives. And coming off of that VOR, there's 360 radials that basically are radio signals that are transmitted in all directions. Now, those radials will get further and further apart the further that you get from the station. So what we say is, on average, an average VOR, if we were to look at it and we had a VOR here and a VOR here, and the average VOR is only going to be about 40 miles away. Okay, so that it will only travel for about 40 miles away. But to give you an idea of potentially, for some people that like this stuff, if you are 60 miles from the station, and I'll put this in writing so you can see it. So if you are 60 nautical miles from the station, the distance between these two radials, so I'm going to call this the 090 degree radial, and I'm going to call the bottom one the 091 degree radial, okay? The distance between those two radials at 60 nautical miles is 1 nautical mile separation, okay? At 30 nautical miles, if we were to half that distance, then you're basically just going to half the number. So the distance between those two radials would then be 1/2 of a nautical mile, or 0.5, okay? That would kind of give you an idea of the distance in terms of how far they go. Now, generally, what we say is that VORs are usually good for about 40 nautical miles, although there are some circumstances where they are good for further. And it also depends on your altitude and the type of VOR. Once again, talking to the private pilot class, this is something that we get into more on the instrument side, because VORs actually have what is known as a service volume. And the service volume dictates, it dictates how, the strength of the transmitter and how far out that it actually reaches. And it's also based on the altitude. So there's 3 different types of VOR transmitters, if you want to think about them that way in terms of strength or power. We have a high, a low, and a terminal. So those are the 3 different types, okay? So going back to the chart here, just making sure everybody understands. My writing has dramatically improved. Thank you, Bruce. It's because I'm just doing lines. I know what my limitations are now. So anyways, with the VOR radials, as mentioned, if we were to look on an actual sectional chart or TAC chart, as we can see here, we have we do have the Ventura VOR, which is right here. And the Ventura VOR, we can see the frequency of 108.2. So that's the frequency that we're going to put into our navigational radio Channel 19 is referring to the military channel, so we don't actually use that. And then the VTU is the identifier for Ventura. So remember, the way that we read Morse code is from top to bottom, and it's from left to right. So if we were to look at the very first line of the Morse code here, it's dot, 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 dash. That refers to the V in Ventura. The T is the next line, which is just a dash, and then the U is the final line, which is the dot, dot, dash. So you don't need to memorize Morse code. This is just, you would look on your sectional, and the very, very first thing you always want to do is what we call tune and identify the VOR. Make sure that the VOR is actually working. Make sure that you have identified the correct station. That's one that students miss a lot, where they've got fat fingers, and instead of putting in 108.2, they might put in like 107.2 and 107, or 109.2. That might be a completely different VOR somewhere else on a different part of, it might be Van Nuys or something like that. Now, the line underneath the 108.2 indicates that there is no voice communication or services available on this frequency. Remember that certain VORs have the ability to receive information from flight service stations, or allow you to have two-way radio communication between flight service stations. So that is the whole purpose of that. If the line was not there, then that means two-way radio communication, or at least voice communication, could occur. So the other thing to note is that we do have the compass rose, and the compass rose points always magnetically. So as you can see here, we do have the 0 mark. The 0 is actually pointing to magnetic north, and then we have the compass rose that goes around it. Anytime that we have a question, what you want to do is pull out and really kind of focus in on when it says go direct from an airport. Let's say we're going direct from Point Mugu Airport, and we are basically going to go direct to the VOR. If I extend that line out from Point Mugu Naval Air Station through the VOR, what I am paying attention to is where that line intersects the compass rose. So we've got 060, which is right there. We have 070, and right here is 080. So it's probably somewhere between 075 and 080. That would be the answer that I'd be looking for on the exam. That's what we're doing on the zoomed in version. So keep that in mind, is we're looking at where that line intersects on the compass rose, and then understanding where we're coming from. Do we need to look at, is that the answer, or are we looking for the reciprocal value? Remember, the reciprocal value is just the opposite number. You can either add or subtract 180, or you can do the +2 -2 thing that I showed you in class. It works for 90% of the numbers out there. There's a couple that it does not work for. All right. So that is VORs in a nutshell. So let's go through the actual radials. Remember that the radials only go, they go in all directions, but you can't, they're just like freeways if you want to think about them that way. For example, if you are going to be traveling in your car, we'll look at the middle one here. So with this one right here, okay, I am northbound on the 180 freeway, all right? The town is representing the VOR. And if I continue past that, I'm basically on an interchange, and that interchange changes to the freeway, the 360 freeway. So that is actually representing the 360-degree radial. So this top part, this radial that's basically sticking out of the VOR, which basically goes up, that is the 360-degree radial. The one that's going straight down is the 180-degree radial. So if we are basically south of the VOR, we are tracking the 360-degree radial, but we're on the 180-degree freeway, or 180-degree radial, if you want to think about it that way, okay? Now, the way that we manipulate what radial we're choosing, or what course that we want to follow or find, is using that OBS. So we can twist that OBS, and that compass card will move right and left. Now, the other thing that we're also looking for is inside of that little white box there, we're going to have a to, a from, or we could potentially have the word off, or a barber pole indication, basically indicating that it doesn't have a good signal, or we're kind of in that cone of confusion, if you will, when we're overflying the VOR. So if we look at it just as a standard airplane here, this airplane is on the 180-degree radial, but it is tracking the 360-degree radial, that pink line just north of the VOR. The reason why we're tracking that line, if you will, is that we want to always go fly to the VOR with a to indication. We never want to fly to a VOR with a from indication. Now, some of you got confused the other day when I said if you just flip the numbers. So what I mean by that is that if this said from an FM, all you need to do is flip whatever's on the bottom and put it on the top. So you can see how 180 is on the bottom. I would just put the 180 on the top and move the 0 to the bottom. That's all we mean by flipping the numbers. It's taking the reciprocal. The other thing too is that if you didn't want to do any math or anything like that, all you can do is just you can look on your heading indicator or anywhere else. You can basically draw lines and figure out what the reciprocal number is. So, you know, the opposite of 60 is 240 if you didn't want to add or subtract 180 degrees. So that's one option that you have as well. Now, for the purposes of what we're going to do today, like I said, I'll show you how to track to a VOR with the correct indications. Remember, whenever we're going to it, we want the to indication. Whenever we're flying away from it, we want the from indication. Okay. All right, so let's see. As we're approaching the VOR, what will end up happening is we will get into the cone of confusion. The cone of confusion is effectively where we are going to see the CDI start to move one way or the other, and it will start to move erratically to the point that it will kind of swing in and out, and then eventually we'll either get the off symbol, or what will end up happening is we will get the barber pole, if you will. So the barber pole or the off is just indicating that it doesn't have a signal. Now, the reason why this is occurring is the fact that we've got 360 radials that are basically converging in one single location, that the receiver is getting confused. It doesn't know which of the radials you want because there's so much information. So we can't say if the VOR is going to swing out to the left or to the right. It's very random when it does it. But what you want to do is you don't want to chase the needle when you're approaching the VOR. Usually that's about a half a mile or so. You want to make very small corrections, if anything. So whatever your correction is, and this isn't a no-wind environment, the one that the author is demonstrating to you, we just want to maintain our heading of north. And as we maintain our heading, what we're looking for is that once we get a little bit further away from the VOR, that VOR will then come back to center, as long as we weren't blown off, of course, or sometimes it might be maybe just slightly askew where we can make a small adjustment and then basically make a little bit of a right turn in this example and move that back into the center portion, okay? Assuming everything was good and we basically continued on a northbound heading, now what we are is, remember that this is the 360 degree radial if you want. So we're on the 360 degree freeway if you want. And Kim, yep, it will automatically switch from the to indication to the from indication automatically, right? So it automatically will switch. Once it gets out of that cone of confusion, remember, there's a couple limitations for VORs. The first limitation is going to be line of sight. So the VOR, if there's any type of terrain or anything along those lines that will interfere with that line of sight, then obviously you can't pick up the VOR signal. The other thing as well is the cone of confusion that we're talking about right now. And then the third thing is that we'll talk about is going to be reverse sensing. So if I were flying away from this with the incorrect from or to or whichever way I'm going, then the airplane will basically give me incorrect indications, okay? So hopefully everybody's good with that so far. That didn't confuse anybody. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at this Luz Monteiro. Very bad at pronunciation. All right, so if I open this up, and for those of you that were not sure in terms of where to go, you can basically go to that little tiny I there where it says not secure. So, but anyways, what we're gonna do is we have our airplane pointed here. I have everything set up the way I want it to be. And in this case, I want to track the 030 degree radial. So my goal is to track that green line on the opposite side of that VOR. So I am going to basically try to get onto this blue line, which is the 210 degree radial, which is the reciprocal of 030. So what I have set up at the very bottom, if you look in the VOR, is I've got 030 set up. My airplane is going to the station, which is what I want, and I've got the triangle with the 2 indication on the VOR. Now, the only thing I need to do is figure out how much do I want to turn the airplane in order to intercept this line. Now, with everything set up, you'll see that the CDI is off to the right, and because it's off to the right, that means that my line or whatever I'm trying to intercept is off to the right. So if I go ahead and start this guy up right here, you'll start to see my airplane is moving. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a bank to the right. See if I can make this not very severe here. So right now we are crabbed in and we are trying to track. As you can see in the VOR needle is slowly starting to swing in, okay? As it approaches the center, what I want to do is then make that turn back to 030. So my heading indicator, I'm going to go ahead and bug is 030. And at this point, I'm going to slowly start to make that turn. I don't want to overfly past it, even though I probably will just a little bit. Shows you how good I am at computer simulations. So in this case, if I was fighting the wind, I am going to basically try to fly just slightly to the left of 030. And I'm going to still see if I can center that back into the donut. So you can see that the needle is starting to come back in. And I'm making a right-hand turn back to 030. And in this case, now everything's looking good. So my CDI is perfectly centered in the donut. We can look at our DME at the bottom. I'm 2 miles away, 1.8, 1.7. I'm expecting to get inside the cone of confusion. Now, the closer I get to the VOR, the more sensitive it is. Now, in this case, there is no wind, so that's the cone of confusion. We saw the needle basically swing out, and now it's starting to swing back in. I have a from indication at the bottom here, so I know the VOR is behind me. If I look at my DME, my number is increasing. There's 2 nautical miles, 2.2, 2.3. And now, as a pilot, I can just make small corrections. So if that needle is slightly to the right, I can come just ever so slightly to the right and see if I can intercept that, and then basically make small adjustments as I am moving through the system, all right? So that is what it would look like if we're tracking and intercepting a radial or a VOR in this case, however you want to call it. Any questions with that so far? Give everyone just a moment here. All right, so that is basically what we're looking for. So as mentioned, hopefully everybody had a chance to see that. The other thing that we want to do is what happens if we're flying direct to a VOR? How do we find the shortest way to get to a VOR? So let me go ahead and go back to the slide presentation real quick here and show you that slide, and then we'll show you how to actually do that. All right, let's see. All right, so flying direct to a VOR. Is the needle still pointing the direction you should adjust to? So some questions here. How did you pick the 030 to start? I just picked a random radial in this case. So this is just an example of how to fly it, Dave. George, when you are from and off the radial, does the needle still point in the direction you should adjust to? Not necessarily, George. That's the reason why we call it the cone of confusion. The needle could point right or left. Saeed, what happens if the direction we're flying also has a VOR? So usually what you're going to do is the VORs are not that close together. You're going to switch to the next VOR at the halfway mark is the typical answer there. Okay. Now, in this case, we're going to fly direct to a VOR. Now, George is asking, will the needle still point the direction you should adjust it to, even when you're past the cone of confusion? Yes, you should. Yes, it will still point in that direction. Okay. All right. When we are flying direct to a VOR, all we want to do is it's a couple easy steps. Number one, we always start off with tuning and identifying your VOR. Okay, that's going to be your first step. After that, what you're going to do is once you have your VOR tuned and identified, you want to then move your OBS in order to get, you want a 2 indication with your CDI centered. Okay, that's the next step. Number 3, what you're going to do is whatever that number is at the top that gave you the CDI, that basically allowed the CDI to be centered, that is a number that you're going to turn to. So you're basically going to turn to the heading, the initial heading if you want, and we find that at the top of the VOR because that's what is set. And then the final thing that we do is we are basically getting one additional twist, and I'll show you what that is to ensure that you're on the radial. Okay, so we always tune and identify the VOR. From that point, we are going to twist the OBS in order to get a 2 indication with the CDI centered. Whatever the number is on the very, very top with the needle centered, even if it's 1, 1, 1, that right there, whatever that number is at the top, that is what I turn to. That is going to be my heading. So I plug that in, and I want to make sure I turn to that. And we'll talk about the one additional twist, but that's just you get one additional twist of the OBS, and that additional twist is to center the needle, and that will tell you what radial you're currently on. Okay. Sounds good. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at that. I'll go back to the actual Chrome tab here and back to our Lumens. So what I'm going to do is I am just going to go ahead and clear out the tracing so we can start from scratch. And in this case, I'm going to move my airplane way over here. And I am going to move my airplane to a heading of, let's just make it a random heading. I'm going to say 111. Okay. So in this case, my airplane is effectively moving all the way away from the VOR. And if I don't know where the VOR is located, remember this airplane is equipped with DME, so I can utilize the DME, which is at the bottom center of the screen here. The very first thing that I want to do, and I'm going to slow this simulation down just a little bit to 2x so everybody can follow along. So the airplane is now effectively on a heading about 111. All right, so it's heading south, as you can see, or south-ish, if you want to call it that. The very first thing that I'm going to do is tune and identify this VOR. So once I listen to the Morse code and identify that it's the correct one and it's working, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to be able to take a look at my VOR at the bottom, and I want to go ahead and twist my VOR until I get a 2 indication with the needle centered. All right, so if you do this, this would be incorrect because this is a from indication with the needle centered, so I need to put that number at the bottom, basically on the top. So I'm going to keep twisting it until I have a 2 indication. And obviously you can do this a lot quicker in the airplane, but I'm just kind of showing you what this is going to end up looking like. So as I get it, you'll notice that it did flip from a from to a to. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep twisting until I can actually get that needle roughly centered. Okay. So now that that needle's centered roughly on 259, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make whatever the shortest turn is to get to 259. So in this case, I will just kind of make a long roundabout right-hand turn here, and I will bug my heading of 259, which is the red dot. So there's 240, 250, somewhere in here. Okay. So there's 259. Now, as I make that turn, I am turning to whatever the number is at the very top of the VOR that I basically dialed in, which we can see the top number is 259, which is what we have in the OBS. All right. Now, this is, of course, accelerated, so this is exaggerated what's ending up happening here. But as I make that first turn and I come around to the VOR, my airplane is coming around, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to level my wings roughly at about 259, 260-ish, okay? So as I level my wings, what ends up happening is that I basically overshot the radial that I was looking for. So in this case, what I get, and that's 259, that's where we're at, is I get one more twist, and that will tell me the radial that we're currently on. So in this case, the radial that we're currently on is the 269 degree radial, We have a 2 indication, and we can now see the DME is starting to fall. We're getting closer and closer to the station. And then it's my job as a pilot, in order to keep this needle centered inside the donut. If it starts to slide away, right or left, then all I'm going to do is make those correct choices depending on what I'm trying to do, or if I don't want to chase the needle in that case. All right. Does everyone understand how we did that step by step? Sorry for leaving that wording on there. Yep. Trust the airplane. The little airplane circling the earth on the sim is hypnotic. Yeah, I know. It just kind of keeps spinning and spinning and spinning. Okay. So that is how we fly to a VOR. Remember that you do get that one extra twist at the end, and that lets you know what radial you're on. Let's see what questions you have. So you don't have direct to a VOR station. We don't really have direct to a VOR station using a VOR. Now, if we wanted to go direct to a VOR station and plug in the VOR identifier in the GPS, we can absolutely do that. We can do direct that way, but that's not using the VOR system. The extra turn is because in that turn, you could see that we basically overshot the radial, right? See if I can draw that real quick here. So the radial that we were kind of aiming for was this one, but you can see I kind of had the simulation accelerated, so my turn was fairly wide. You're not necessarily going to have that. What we ended up on is where that longer pink line is. So what that allows me to do, that extra turn, is it verifies that which radial I'm currently on. So I ended up on, I think it was what, the 261-ish radial, somewhere around there. So that's basically how we do it. We select our heading, Kim, by we first twist the OBS, we get the 2 indication, and then whatever number is right there at the top by that little yellow chevron, that's going to be our initial heading that we turn to. Okay, that's the initial heading that we turn to, Kim. Okay, that's the first thing that I did, was I twist my OBS. I made sure I had the 2 indication. My CDI was nice and centered down the middle. And then at that point, the big thing is that I basically go to whatever that heading is that I just circled. All right, that's my initial turn. The dots on the side of the VOR that you're looking at, these represent the course deviation. So these are 2 degrees. So a full scale deviation is going to be 10 degrees to the right and 10 degrees to the left. The 259 came in because that is what we ended up utilizing. Okay, so once again, I'm just picking random numbers in terms of radials to track or intercept. It's whatever we ended up with just to get to or from. So the longer pink line mark was the 261. That was the radial that we ended up on. So as mentioned, we were aiming, we initially tuned in for this radial, but we ended up on, I'm going to say the longer pink line is roughly 261. Okay. So let's see here. All right, so if Michael's asking, what happens if you go from like 090 to 030 without going to the station? Okay, so we can look at that real quick. That's a good question. So let me go back to the simulation, and I am going to clear out the trace here just so we can look at that. So you don't need to actually be flying to the station to utilize the VOR. If you want to know what radial you're passing, I'm going to put the airplane at 360 degrees, so it's going to be directly going north now. Now, this airplane is going to go north, and if I want to know what radial I'm passing, this is something that we do in the instrument world, because what we have is there are some approaches called DME arcs, and what a DME arc is we basically arc around a VOR, and then we fly inbound to get to an approach, okay? So the reason why that's important is we need to know what radial we're currently passing. So what I'll do is you'll notice that the way that I have the VOR currently set up is a 2 indication, and why the needle is to the right is it's showing that the VOR or that radial is in front of me. As we pass the radial, the needle will start to swing to the center, and then it will start to swing to the left, okay? As we do that, I'm going to move the OBS again, and then I'll move it back so that way the next radial is in front of me, so we can see all of the radials that we're passing as we go along. Now, the first radial that we're looking at is going to be this one right here, which is going to be the 256. So that's basically extended off. All right. So in this case, what we have is, I'll show you in the simulation. So I'm going to go ahead and start this guy. You can ignore the airplane going around the Earth. So we're about 20 miles away from the VOR. The big thing that I would say is that we are heading slightly, not northbound. We were heading northbound. So let's see if we can head northbound again. And you'll see that the VOR needle will start to kind of swing in, okay? So as it swings in, we are not going to the station, but it is telling me what radial we are going to be passing. So when that CDI is perfectly centered in the donut, that means that we are passing whatever the radial is at the top, which is basically that blue line. So that CDI, because it's to the right of the airplane, means that it is in front of us. Now, once again, that's a higher concept that you learn in the instrument class, because you have to do DME arcs, or at least learn about DME arcs. But if you were not using, as I think it was someone said, if you're not flying direct to the station, you can basically utilize it to see which radial you're either on. So for example, that's the radial that the airplane is currently on right this second. Any questions about that? And as we can see, that needle is starting to swing further and further to the left, which means we're passing that radial. Now, if I wanted to know what the next radial is, I'm going to go ahead and, let's say I'm going to spin this, and I want to know, when are we going to pass the 240, okay? And remember, what will end up happening is it will start to swing in again. And either way, you just need to know which side of the radial you're on. How do you know you're 20 miles away? So in this case, this airplane has a DME. So I'll go ahead and point to that. That is right there. So that 28.9 nautical miles is how far away we are. So we're actually getting a little bit further and further away from the VOR at the moment. Okay. So as we approach this radial, it will slowly start to swing in again. And as it swings in, it'll go to the donut. When it goes to the donut, that's the radial that we're basically passing or we're on. And then it will start to swing further to the left. So you can use it in other fashions as well. Remember, don't make it more complicated than you need to. It is not required for the FAA exam to show this, at least for the private pilot. All right. Hopefully that kind of clears up how to use the VOR. Hopefully that will make a little bit more sense. It's the same concept, Jim. Yep, same concept. When you're flying to a VOR, have a to indication. When you're flying away from a VOR, have a from indication. Okay. What I encourage everybody to do is try out this simulator. Now that you guys know how it works, if you scroll down to the bottom of the page on the simulator a little bit further, it will give you the keyboard commands in terms of if you want to play with the bank and just kind of see how it operates. And I encourage you to try to track and intercept a VOR. And I also encourage you to go direct to a VOR, which is what we just did. If you want to screw around with the wind settings down here, if I want to go ahead and put a 50-knot wind in, I can. And then you can see how that will affect the airplane basically getting blown off course, which is good practice anyway. So I would encourage you to do that. The last thing I wanted to show you, yep, thank you for reminding me, was reverse sensing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pause the simulation again, and let me get rid of the wind. I'm going to get rid of the trace here. So remember, what we said is that anytime that we are going to the VOR, we never ever want to go, I'm going to put in 240. We never ever want to go to the VOR with a from indication, okay? So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and flip the indication so that way it has a from indication, which is the green side here. And remember, everything on the left there is primarily just for your reference. So I'm going to throw in about 0. I'm going to make it easy, just 060. So as we can see here, I'm doing what we should not be doing, right? So I've got a from indication right there, and I'm going to a VOR, which is the no-no, all right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the simulation here, And if I were to actually follow the needle, you'll see that the needle is now showing me that I need to go to the left in order to intercept. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a slight turn to the left. I will basically make a left-hand turn to 210. And as a pilot, if I don't know what's going on, I'm just thinking that there's a significant wind that keeps pushing me further and further and further off course, because now I'm basically just crabbing, okay? So now I'm just going to level the wings, and this is what we call chasing the needle. This is what we call reverse sensing. So as you can see, the airplane is getting further and further away from that green line, and that green line is representing the radial that we're tracking inbound to the station. And yet my CDI is getting further and further away. So most pilots at this point, they start to get a little bit concerned. They start to turn even more. Let's say we're going to start to turn to a southbound heading of 180. And now they notice that, well, that's not really working. The needle is just still not behaving. It still keeps going further and further to the left, and they don't want to get a full-scale deviation. All right, so that's what happens when reverse sensing. If I make the turn back and I want to try to get back on course, the course that I would initially try to use is going to be whatever is at whatever's kind of at the top here. So let me go ahead and try to make a turn back the other way. So if I make a turn back the other way, maybe I can get this sorted, okay? But do you see how that works, where you have to kind of reverse your thinking in the sense of when we are in reverse sensing, that is where we can get into some trouble using the VOR system, okay? So now I'm turning back to the right, so I'm kind of almost heading slightly back to the west here, and this will actually start to swing in, which is contrary to what we have. Now, if I wanted to correct that, all I'm going to do is instead of the 060 at the top, I'm going to put the 060 at the bottom. And that would then give me the correct indication. So as you can see, if I put the 060 just right about there, we've got 060 at the bottom, 240 at the top. Now we have a 2 indication. Everything is looking a lot better. And in a no wind condition, the top of the number on the VOR and your heading should be equal, okay? So that would be just like this. If I bug 240 and I slowly start to make the turn, remember you want to lead your turns because the airplane is moving fairly quickly. And as you do that, that needle is going to start to swing in towards the donut, and you can do a small crab, for example, and then it will start to come in, okay? So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense in terms of what reverse sensing is and the reason why we want to avoid reverse sensing. Everyone good with that? Let's see here. In order to move the airplane just quickly, you can double click on it and it will be a heading right here. So you can throw that heading in, and when you're done, just hit the X. All right. All right. If you have an HSI, we're not gonna have time to do the HSI one today, but I believe if you go to the top here on the online simulators, there is the HSI simulator. You can basically do an HSI, the RMI, the ADF if you're really interested. So they have a variety of other simulators here. If you go to the online simulators and then scroll down, you can practice that as well. Remember, the HSI is just a combined instrument. It's basically putting the DG or the directional gyro, if you want to call it that, on top of or inside of the VOR. There's a VOR on top of the I keep saying HI here, the heading indicator. Okay, that's really the only difference. All right. Good. I'm glad that makes a little bit more sense. I know this stuff can be tricky, but once again, if you see it kind of a demonstration live, then usually people understand it a lot better. All right, let's get back to it. Let me go ahead and start the presentation, and we'll get into some of the VOR questions. Now, just because you understand how VOR works, I'm not expecting you to be an expert in answering these VOR questions. Remember, when the poll opens, remember to please, please, please answer in the poll. As Missy has nicely given me this slide, there is an offer, a poll, and a file. If you click on the word poll, when it does open, it should give you the options, and most of the polls that we're going to be dealing with today have a figure associated with it. I will put the figure up on the screen as we go along. So very first one is going to refer to this figure 28, illustration 5. So let me go ahead and bring up the poll real quick, and then I'll move on and I'll share the results with you, and we'll discuss how we actually got here. Okay, so first thing is it says illustration number 5. I've highlighted in red, so that's the one in the dead center of the screen, and it says the VOR receiver has the indications shown. What radial is the aircraft crossing? So remember, the aircraft is crossing a particular radial. It's just the example that we showed before. Is it A, 030, B, 210, or C, 300? I'll give everyone just a moment on that. Yep, and Zaf, just like Zaf said, what you have is, the older planes have dedicated DME instruments or boxes, or however you want to call them that. When you get into the modern aircraft that are GPS equipped, the GPS suffices as DME or distance measuring equipment. You just need to know the differences, because distance measuring equipment is slant range distance versus just the distance from point A to point B on a GPS. If you can't read the to or from flag, that says to, Scott. So that is a to indication, and we've got 210 at the top and 030 at the bottom, for those that can't see that. All right, I'll give everyone just another moment on that. Don't change your answers. It's usually not good if you do. Usually gets worse. GPS does not use DME. It's just using the distance from point A to point B. So it's different than the slant range distance that we're referring to at this point.
Oh, 30 the CDR.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up right there. So anytime that we are flying to a VOR, it's actually a bearing, and anytime we're flying away from a VOR, it's a radial, if you want the precise terminology here. We have 53% of the class with the correct answer. Correct answer here is actually going to be A, okay? So good job for those that had it. For those that said 300, that's just a misrepresentation of what we have there. That is not 300, that's 30. It's either 030 or 210 at the top there. So C is completely incorrect. Your options are really A or B here. It's one or the other. Now, even though that 210 is at the top, what you have is, if we have a VOR station, so let's call that the VOR station right there, we're obviously going to have two different radials, right? We're going to have roughly a 030 radial, and then we're going to have that same radial on the other side that kind of sticks out. Now, the top radial is 030, and the aircraft in this case is effectively going to be passing through that radial, where that pink line is basically going northbound, just like I showed you. So that is how we do it, because we need to track the opposite, right? Because if we're going to the VOR, we're actually tracking that other line right there, and I'll make it kind of a bluish color so that way you can see it a little bit better. That bluish line is going to be the 210 degree radial, and the pink line is the 030 degree radial, all right? Janet, if you can give me the full question for number 7, I can explain it as soon as we're done here, okay? Going towards is tracking a bearing, yep. Oh, that's a good point. So Tom let me know that, and I don't know because I've never been on that side, but apparently you guys can't change your answers after it. I guess it's maybe people who are chiming in at the last second. All right, let's go ahead and look at another one here. I've got another option. So this is referring to another figure. So let me go ahead and bring up the figure, and we'll start the poll. Now, if you can't read it, I kind of zoomed in because I know these are a little bit difficult. So we're referring to figure 21. What course should be selected on the OBS to make a direct flight from Mercer County Regional Airport, Area 3 to Minuet Vortec, Area 1 with a 2 indication. Now, I did a little bit of the work for you because these are hard to read. Now, what we're doing is we are going from the airport on the bottom left of the screen to the VOR on the very top. If you zoom into that, the main thing that you want to pay attention to is what I've circled on the right-hand side here. You can see that red line, just like the example I gave you, is obviously intersecting a specific compass point, right? Good to know, Missy. Thank you. Remember the way that it's asking the question as well. It's not asking what radial you're currently on, but what are you tracking? What are you tracking to get to the 2 indication? I agree with you, Roberto. If you have your chart supplement, you can pull it up and follow along as well. These are a little bit challenging. That's the reason why I kind of did a little bit of the work for you. All right, so what we have here is about majority of the class has the right answer. But before I end the poll, I'll kind of just go through it one more time. Now, the radial that basically goes down and away from the VOR is obviously going to be 179 or pretty close to it. My red line may not be perfect, but what we're looking at is that radial is roughly 179 degrees, okay? And that's probably not the best color to use here. So that radial is roughly 179 degrees. Well, that, if we were to track the blue line or that radial, we would actually have a from indication going to the VOR. Because remember, the airplane is going from here and it is tracking up and along this route, right? This is the way that the airplane is going. It's trying to fly to that VOR, right? And we never, when we fly to the VOR, we don't want to be on the we want to be on the reciprocal of whatever that number is. So if we extended this line further out or took the opposite of whatever that number is, this happens to be 179. So what you can do is you can basically say your 2 is from whatever that is, and it's 180 degrees. That's kind of the equation that you're going to use here. So your 2, which is what we're looking for, is going to be whatever your from was. The from was 179, okay? So what we can do is we can enter 179 degrees, and then what will end up happening is we're going to add 180 degrees to it, and that will then give us a 2 indication that's basically going to equal 359 degrees. This is just one where they're giving you 2 different options that are fairly close, 001 and 359. It's the same one we did in class the other day. For those of you that want to do the +2, -2, if you take the number itself, it's going to be 179. I'm going to space these numbers out just a little bit so you can see how this works. All you do is you add 2 to the first number, and then you subtract 2 from the second number, and you don't do anything to the third number. So if I were to add 2 to the first number, I get 3. If I subtract 2 from the second number, I get 5, and then I don't touch the last part. So that's that way of doing it. This also works where you can flip the +2 and -2, and you can just flip those around, -2, +2. So that's one way of thinking about it. All right. Once again, if you're doing this on a phone, I apologize, but I just want to at least make sure you get the concepts down. And the concepts are the most important thing. You can basically take your time and look at these questions and answers individually because they are on the practice exams. So keep that in mind. Okay, everyone? Line straight up and down, assuming the map is drawn or displayed with the north to the top. Yes, exactly, Tom. Nimish, remind me that at the end here, and then we'll continue. All right, so any more questions about VORs before we continue to the weather? Appreciate everyone hanging out on this wonderful Saturday. Hopefully that cleared up a little bit about VORs. I'm not going to say that that did 100%, but that should give you a better idea of how they operate and how they work. And then just looking at some of those test questions. Like I said, there's only 15 or 16 VOR test questions that you need to know. For the private pilot, there's quite a few more for the instrument folks out there. So just take it step by step. And like I said, I know these maps don't really do it justice, but take the time and make sure you pull out your chart supplement. If you need to print it or zoom in, by all means do so. And I think that'll help out quite a bit, okay? All right, let's go ahead and move on to aviation weather. So we had a lot of people that were having some issues reading and deciphering METARs and TAFs the other day. So I basically took all of the METAR and the TAF questions and compiled them together so that way we can look at them. If you want to jump ahead and basically download or at least have the ability to look at it, it's going to be in the FAA testing supplement, and the figures that you want to look at ahead of time are basically going to be, I believe it's figure 12, and it will also be figure, let me see, 15. In the event that you don't want to look at it on the screen, that way you'll have a better idea in the event that you want to zoom in for your own purposes, okay? For those of you that need a copy of the FAA testing supplement, once again, if you don't have a copy of it, you can download it directly from the FAA website. I will go ahead and throw the link in here for everybody in the chat, so that way if you want it, it's yours. And then just go to figures 12 and 15. Those are the only figures that we're going to be using for the rest of the class today, okay? All right, so with that, what we're going to do is we are going to talk about METARs again, just kind of as a rehash of yesterday's class. So remember, a METAR is the Meteorological Aviation Report. We call it a METAR for short. And METARs are issued every 55 minutes past the hour, okay, unless there's some type of weather conditions that exist that basically change it from a VFR field to an IFR field, or maybe the winds pick up significantly, unless there's some type of major change. Now, the changes, the FAA has a list in terms of what they consider major changes are, and the list is kind of an endless 3 or 4 page list. But anytime that there's an update that's basically warranted and it's beyond 55 minutes past the hour, then what it is we end up with what we call a specie. So a specie comes out anytime that there's some type of significant change when it basically occurs, all right? Now, for those of you that need it as well, let's see here. I did put the file in for the METAR and TAF decoder. For those that want the PIREP decoder, which we have not talked about in class, I will upload that real quick as well. The PIREP decoder is for pilot reports, so you have that option as well. They're designed slightly differently, but in terms of pilot reports, we have a UA and a UUA, so there's an urgent and a routine pilot report. So let me go ahead and just share that with you before we continue. All right, so here is the PIREP decoder for everyone. If you want it, it's yours. All right, there's the PIREP decoder. So, but for what we're going to be doing today, all you're going to need is the METAR and the TAF decoder. Now, I've never used this, but some people like acronyms because we're filled with acronyms. All METARs and TAFs basically always follow the same type of format. So METARs have a specific format, TAFs have a specific format. They use the same coding throughout, but the METARs are always in the same order. So you can use this, the should Tina walk Vera's rabbit without checking the dog's appetite, if you want to memorize it. I've never honestly used it or had a student use it, but it's there if you find that helpful. And from there, what we have is, remember that it will always tell us the type of observation. That's the very first column that we have. And the next thing that we have is going to be the station identification. So where is that weather report occurring from? Now, METARs are basically providing current weather conditions at the field of wherever it's located. So this one's in Los Angeles. Then the next line is going to be the time, is the UTC time. Now, the UTC time, you want to break that apart just slightly because as we can see here, the very first number, the 08, is the day, and then it's what time is it Zulu. So this is the 8th day of the month at 1955 Zulu. The next one that you have is the wind direction and velocity. So once again, you can break those numbers up with my little arrows there. So we've got a wind direction of 310 at 15 knots, gusting to 27 knots. That is what that line indicates right there. Okay. After that, we have the VERA, or V, which is visibility. It's a half a statute mile of visibility. After that, we've got the runway visual range, also known as RVR. The first half of that is going to be what runway it is. So before the slash, the R25 is indicative of the runway that it's referring to. So this is runway 25. The visibility that we can see is 3,000 feet down the runway. The next one is weather. So with weather, these are the weather conditions. So once again, if you follow along in the decoder that I provided, it is step by step and it's always in the same order. SHRA are basically rain showers or showery rain, however you want to call it. Then after that, we've got scattered. And after scattered, we've got 005. Okay, so 005 is 500 feet. That's another one that people seem to be missing as well. So if you have 005, that is 500 feet. If you have 050, that is 5,000 feet. And if you've got 500, if you will, that is going to be a whopping 50,000 feet. So keep that in mind. That's how we read those numbers. And you can see as that number slides to the left, we're basically adding a digit behind it on the opposing side. All right. Remember that with the cloud forecasts and everything else, it always starts off with sky clear, right? That's going to be our biggest one, where it's just nice clear skies. Then we have few, scattered, broken, and overcast. Those are going to be as they relate from basically clear skies at the top all the way down to overcast conditions at the bottom, which are going to be the worst conditions. So that's how we talk about cloud layers. Remember that the only cloud layers that we're going to talk about in terms of what we really care about for VFR is going to be these guys right here. This is how we define a ceiling. So it's the lowest layer of the overcast or broken. Those are the two most important that we care about. All right, continuing along. We talked about scattered at 500. Then we've got broken at 1,000 feet. Now this one is important here because the only type of cloud that we report on the METAR and the TAF is CB, which is a cumulonimbus cloud. Then after that, we have our temperature of 25 and dew point of 18. We talked about that yesterday in class. So remember, usually when it's within 5 degrees Celsius of each other, the atmosphere is more inclined to either develop low clouds and or fog. Remember that, all right? We have our altimeter setting of 3001 and then any remarks to follow. Now the remarks, they can be kind of endless at times. It can tell you, depending on the equipment that's available, it can tell you what time the rain ended, what time it began, or anything else along those lines. David, yep, that is correct. That's one way of looking at it. All right, so that's how we read a METAR. And honestly, the best way to do this is just to have that METAR decoder out there. And if you do these enough and you practice these enough, it usually becomes pretty easy. The only other one that I will point out as well that some people do not seem to understand are going to be this one right here. It's the second line. It says 00/M03. So the temperature is 00, so it's 0 degrees, pretty cold out. -3 is the dew point. So you can have a dew point of -3. The other one that people got confused is when we have fog, you have a vertical visibility of 800 feet. So vertical visibility, remember that we basically have a weather reporting station on the airport, and what it's doing is the vertical visibility is looking straight up. So at what point, how far can it see straight up? Because fog, if we were to look at it horizontally, you're not going to be able to see very far down the field for the most part. When we look at it horizontally, that is generally known as what we call a RVR, which is a runway visual range, versus, you know, comparing that to what is vertical visibility, which is the VV. So that is how we do those types of measurements. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense as well. Vertical visibility, just so I can put that out there for you so you can kind of see, and I spelled visibility wrong, sorry about that, but you guys get the idea. So RVR is looking out horizontally, and that's how far a pilot can see down the runway. Vertical visibility is looking straight up, which is different than a ceiling. Yeah, the ceiling is slightly different. Vertical visibility is looking straight up. A ceiling is going to be the lowest of the broken or overcast layer mark, okay? Any questions with that before we look at a few? We'll look at a few of the weather codes, and then we'll look at the test questions. We'll get out of here for the day. So you guys saw this the other day. These are going to be the most frequent, you know, the most frequently used qualifiers and weather codes that we have available to us. Now, anytime that we have something that does not have a qualifier, and a qualifier is basically going to be using the word light, so a minus sign or a plus sign. So it's light, heavy. If it doesn't have a minus or a plus, then it will have no qualifier, which just means that it's moderate. So if I just say it's RA, which is for rain, rain is just going to be moderate rain. VC is another important one, which is in the vicinity of. If we were to look at all of these, the most common ones that you're going to have is SH for showers, thunderstorms. Those of you in the Midwest and the mountainous regions, you're going to have freezing, drizzle, rain, snow. Let's see here. One that usually gets messed up is hail. Hopefully you're not in hail. You have baby rain, or what we call mist, BR. You can think of it that way. You have fog. FU is fume, which is smoke in French. Hopefully you don't have volcanic ash or any of this stuff. Haze is another one. And then from there, that's probably the most prevalent ones that you're going to see flying around the country. And then even when we're flying around in the airlines, occasionally we see ones that, you know, we're not used to seeing from a while ago. Most of these come from the French language, so that's where a lot of these come from. I don't know if it's grapple or not, George. Looking over to the remarks section, as mentioned, the remarks can go on over and over and over. They can go on forever and ever, it seems like. But the biggest ones that you have that I'll mention are anytime you see the word CIG, the ceiling is basically variable between something. And anytime you see a V between a number, that's the variability. So in this case, the ceiling is variable between 1,400 feet and 1,900 feet. The other one that is fairly common as well is going to be the one on the top right, which is RAB, which is rain began, and the last number is going to be how many minutes either after the hour that it started. So in this case, rain began 30 minutes after the hour. And remember, all you're going to do is look at the right next to the METAR when it came out. If it said it came out at 1955 Zulu, then it began at 1930 Zulu, and you can just kind of reference that. The RAE is when rain ended. So if it ended at 30 minutes past the hour, that was a pretty quick rain shower. Some of these just kind of take practice when you look at them. So occasional distant lightning northwest of the station, thunderstorm overhead moving northeast. This is another one where you get the wind that's variable. Remember, anytime you see the V, that V is variable between, and just remember that whether we're talking about a ceiling or a direction, in this case, we're talking about a direction. So it's variable between 270 and 330. Peak wind is basically going to be right here. That first section is telling us the wind direction and velocity. So if I were to put a little dash line right in between there, our wind direction is 330 at 48 knots. And beyond that, the 22 means that it occurred 22 minutes past the hour. In that last example, if the METAR came out at 1955 Zulu, then all I would say is the peak wind occurred at 1922 Zulu time. The last two here are pretty common as well. If you have a pressure rising or pressure falling rapidly, remember that the pressures are going to be your altimeter setting. So our standard is 29.92. If you use that as your benchmark, if it starts going up significantly to, let's say, 30.92 or 28.92, that would mean that pressure is falling or rising rapidly. Okay. We can calculate Zulu time, Kim, by looking in the chart supplement, finding the local airport. Whatever your airport says, you're going to probably subtract a given number for it. So here in Los Angeles, I believe right now we're subtracting, it's either 8 or 7. I'd have to go look. And then we could then calculate what that Zulu time is. All right. All right, so let's go ahead and look at a few of the test questions. As mentioned, if you have the testing supplement or you want the testing supplement, I'll put it in the chat one more time for everybody if you want to zoom in on the answers. So what we're going to be doing is looking at testing figure number 12 to start off with, and I'll put it up on the screen, and then we'll get to the polls. All right. All right, so this is dealing with RAB 35, and we're going to look at this figure right here. So the remarks section for Midway Airport, KMDW, has RAB 35 listed. This entry means what? Is it A, blowing mist has reduced the visibility to 1.5 statute miles? B, rain began at 1835 Zulu, or C, the barometer has risen to 0.35 inches of mercury? Thanks, Missy. I like those videos. Thank you, Michael. So LA is -8. I never really pay attention to the Zulu time because my Apple Watch, I can put a little, I've got a little UTC Zulu time on there, so I can always have it kind of in the background. Oh, we are so close to 100%, folks. All right. So Saeed, why do we subtract the number when calculating Zulu time? For us in the United States, we're always behind Zulu time. So for us, it's pretty easy. We've got about five time zones or 6 time zones. I think we at least 5. So for us, it's always a subtraction number. If you end up being somewhere else, then you'll add to that number. All right, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and end it right there. So correct answer is going to be B for this one. So the correct answer was rain began at 1835 Zulu. So what we first want to do is, number 1, you want to find Midway Airport, and you'll notice it's especially if we go all the way to the end in the remarks, RAB, remember that is rain began at 35, and what we can do is we can look at the time that this came out was 1856, so the rain actually started at 1835, and because there is no RAE, which is rain ended, then that's how we calculate that. All right. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next test question. I believe we're still going to be using that same test figure, which is going to be test figure number 12. But I'll go ahead and pull up the test question here just so you can take a look at it before. Good job, everybody. All right, so this is dealing once again with Midway Airport. And let me go ahead and bring up that same one. What are the current conditions depicted for Chicago Midway Airport? Is it A, sky is 700 feet overcast, visibility 1.5 mile statute mile rain? B, sky 7,000 feet overcast, visibility 1.5 miles heavy rain? Or the sky is 700 feet overcast, visibility is 11, occasionally 2 statute miles with rain? It's interesting that there's so many time zones out there. And that's the reason why I just like to, I don't want to calculate all that. I just have Zulu on the watch. It makes your life a little bit easier. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll right there. We've got 94% of the class with the correct answer. Correct answer here is going to be A. So remember, it is sky, 700 feet overcast, visibility 1.5 statute miles with rain. If we go over to midway, which is the second to last line, what we have here is, if we look at it, we've got 1.5 statute miles visibility, moderate rain or rain, because the fact that it doesn't have a plus or minus, it's not light and it's not heavy, so that's moderate rain. The sky conditions are overcast at 700 feet. That's the 007. So that is where we come up with that. The only thing that I saw, B could be very close, but if you move the decimal point over, what we would need to see is if it was actually 7,000 feet overcast, what it would say would be OVC, and you basically have 070. That's what 7,000 feet overcast would look like, rather than the way it's written, which is 007. 007 is 700 feet, okay? It's just on your iWatch, so Apple Watch or whatever it is, it just allows you to configure it. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to switch gears and we are going to talk about TAFs. Now, TAFs are, remember, a TAF is usually going to be valid for either a 24 or a 30-hour period. The larger airports and military installations will generally have them for 30-hour periods. And TAFs are valid, I believe it's for 5 nautical miles from the primary airport. So not every airport has its own TAF, okay? So that's another important designation. Now, the TAF is a unique thing in terms of what we read, and when we are reading it, you're going to notice that it's broken into several different chunks. For the rest of class, if you want to follow along, you can look in the testing supplement. It is figure 15 if you need to be able to zoom in, but I'll once again have it up for you. So let me go ahead and grab this FAA test question, and then we'll take a look at it together. So this is going to be, what is the valid TAF for Memphis, KMEM, okay? What is the valid period for the TAF? Is it A, the 12th from 1800 Zulu to the 13th at 2400 Zulu, B, the 12th at 1700 Zulu, or is it C, from 1218 Zulu to 1324 Zulu? Be careful with the way that that's worded, though. All right, I'm going to wrap it up right there. So we have about 73% of the class with the correct answer. Correct answer is A here. Let's go ahead and take a look. So number one, we obviously have Memphis, which is at the top there. We're not going to worry about Oklahoma City. What we're looking at is going to be this second line right there, or that second section right there, which is 1218 with the slash 1324. Now, we had about 23% of the class say that it was from 1218 Zulu to 1324 Zulu. That wouldn't make sense, because remember, I told you that TAFs are valid for, you know, a significant period of time, you know, upwards of 20 hours or more, 24 to 30 hours. So that's such a short period of time, it doesn't make sense. What you want to do is you want to remember that if we were to draw a line between each one of these, the way that this would work is that it's the 12th day at 1800 Zulu through the 13th day at 2400 Zulu. That's how we read that. Now, don't get that confused with the first part, because the first part here is basically the issue date and the time. The way that we read that first one is a little bit different, where it came out on the 12th day at 1720 Zulu, but it's valid from the 12th day at 1800 Zulu through the 13th day at 2400 Zulu. Okay, so a little bit different. Just remember that when we're talking about it, that right there is the validity, not the validity period, but the time it was issued. This right here is the validity period, so from when it's basically valid, so from 1800 to 2400 the next day. Okay. CB means cumulonimbus at 800 feet. Cumulonimbus, if it's that one at the end there, this one is overcast 800 feet, cumulonimbus. All right. TAFs will always pertain to the same month. That's the reason why they don't add the month in there. You should know what month we're in, so it's always going to be given at that point. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the next FAA test question. It's basically the same thing. We're just going to look at all the potential questions that are available on the FAA written. So this is for Memphis. What does SHRA stand for? So let me go ahead and bring this up here. SHRA for Memphis means what? Is it rain showers, a shift in wind direction is expected, or a significant change in precipitation is possible? Ooh, so close to 100%. Getting there, though. I feel like the longer I leave the test questions up, the worse it gets. All right, I'm going to go end it right there. And correct answer here is going to be A. So remember that when we're talking about SHRA, which is located right there at the very end of the second line for Memphis, that is rain showers. The RA is rain, SH is showers. If you put it together, we've got rain showers. B is incorrect, which is the shift in wind direction is expected. It's not going to be reported like that. And then the significant change in precipitation is possible. I can see where some people will say possible. The probability is 40%. That's what that line means. But once again, it's not dealing with precipitation there. Okay. All right, good job, everyone, on that. Let's go ahead and look at the next FAA test question, and we'll continue with kind of the same theme here of the TAFs. So this is referring to the same figure, and we're going to be looking at specifically from 1000 to 1200 Zulu time. What is the visibility at Memphis? So let me go ahead and start that. Is it going to be a half a statute mile, 3 statute miles, or 6 statute miles at Memphis between 1000 Zulu and 1200 Zulu? I think there's 4 more FAA test questions, 5 more FAA test questions that relate to this, and then we're done, guys. So. Have a good one, Clayton. All right, so I'm going to end it right there. We've got about 83% of the class with the correct answer there. Correct answer is going to be B. It is going to be 3 statute miles. If you read through this, what you're going to have to do is kind of look at all of the numbers. So what we have here is if I were to read through the first line just quickly, this is the 12th day from 20 to 2200. Then on the 12th day at 2200, we have these conditions. And then our next forecast we have is the 12th day from 2000 to 2200. So that's not it. Then from the 12th at 0200, we have some conditions. And then on the 12th from 0200 to 0500, these conditions. And then we've got the 13th, we're getting closer, 0600 to 0800. And then finally, the second to last line here becoming right here, that's the one that we want, is going to be the 13th day at 1000 Zulu through the 13th day at 1200 Zulu. We have wind calm, and the magic number that we're looking for is 3 statute miles of visibility. So that's how we find that number. All right. Yeah, I wish we could go into the 21st century, but they're still having us teach this. So, all right, let's go ahead and look at the next one. Same question, except what is the forecasted wind for Memphis from 1600 Zulu until the end of the forecast? So let me go ahead and bring up the poll here, and you guys can take a look at that one as well. So what is the forecasted wind? All right, here you go. There's that, and here is the figure again. So we've got A, no significant wind, B, variable in direction at 4 knots, or C, variable in direction at 6 knots. Ricardo, the forecast goes in order, so all right, so correct answer here is actually going to be C. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that here. So number one, first thing we want to do is once again find Memphis, and it's asking us from 1600 Zulu. So it's actually the last line there. If you were to break this up just like that, what you have here is from the 13th day at 1600 Zulu. We have the following conditions, and the magic number that we're looking for is variable at 6 knots. That's where we get the variable at 6 knots from for C. Okay. All right, just 3 more, and then we're all set here. This is referring to the same figure, and the same figure is now we're going to be looking at the bottom part of the TAF, which is dealing with Oklahoma City. Bring this one up right now. All right, so in the TAF from OKC, the FM group is forecast for the hours from 1600 Zulu to 2200 Zulu with the wind from what is it? A, 160 at 10 knots, B, 180 at 10 knots, becoming 200 at 13 knots, or C, 180 at 10 knots. I'm assuming a computer generates most of this stuff nowadays. The really old surface analysis charts that I'll show you in class on Monday, a lot of them are actually hand drawn every couple hours. So they would put the little wind barbs, and you'll notice it's pretty obvious that they're hand drawn because they're kind of messy. All right, looks like we have a pretty split class here on this answer. All right, looks like everybody's got their answer in. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll right now. Correct answer is actually going to be C. So we had about a split. 52% said B, 43% said C. The FAA is looking for C here. If we look at Oklahoma City, and it's telling us to look from 1600 to 2200 Zulu. So if we were to look at the line, and what we have here is from 1600 Zulu. If you were to break that apart, that is the 5th day at 1600 Zulu. And then from that point, what we do is we have the winds situation. So the winds here are going to be 180 at 10 knots. Where most people are reading is they're getting all the way down here, and they're looking at this section where it's becoming these conditions. And it is then becoming 200 at 13, gusting to 20, except the answer just kind of removes the gusting from 20. So this whole set back here is another time period, right? Because this entire section that I'm crossing off starts at 2200 and it goes to 2400, as stated by that becoming 0522 to 0524. So that's that 2-hour period. So really, the only thing it's asking for is from 1600 to the next forecast period, which starts at 2200, is where it starts. Okay, the G means gusting. Yep. All right, let's go ahead and look at another one. This is for Oklahoma as well. I think the last two are for Oklahoma. So same testing figure. It's when does the sky or the clear sky becomes what? So I'm going to bring this one up. All right, in the TAF from OKC, the clear sky becomes, is it A, overcast at 2,000 feet during the forecast period between 2200 Zulu and 2400 Zulu, B, overcast at 200 feet with the 40% probability of becoming overcast at 600 feet during the forecast period between 22 and 2400 Zulu, or is it C, overcast at 200 feet with the probability of becoming overcast at 400 feet during the forecast period between 22 and 2400 Zulu? Two more questions after this, and then we are out of here. So appreciate you hanging in. Give everyone just another second to wrap up their answers here. All right, so majority of the class does have it correct. Correct answer is actually going to be A. Now, what we're going to do is first thing we want to identify the correct TAF, which is for Oklahoma City. And what it's asking for is the clear sky becomes something. So the two statements that we need to see is SKC, which is for sky clear, and the word becoming, because that's the sky clear is becoming something. So from that point, we have the forecast period, which is the 5th day at 2200 Zulu to the 5th day at 2400 Zulu, if you were to just draw a little line in between those. So it's basically valid for a 2-hour period. And then the conditions that we have are 4 statute miles, which is not an option. We've got the showery rain. And then primarily what we have is the overcast at 2,000 feet. So the correct answer is A. It looks like some people answered this probability of. So once again, if you were to break these apart, we have completely separate forecast periods. So this forecast period of becoming through the end of the overcast is one. Then we've got another forecast period between those blue lines, and then the final forecast period at the end. So the one on the last line that basically says probability is telling you that it's from the 6th day at 000 Zulu to 0600 Zulu. So that's a completely different forecast period. So that's not included. All we want is the ones in pink there. Okay. All right. So good job, everyone. Let's go ahead and look at the second to last question here. So same question that we have is during the time period from 0600 Zulu to 0800 Zulu, what visibility is forecast at OKC? So let me go ahead and publish that, and you guys can take a look, and I'll give everyone just a moment. Options are, you got A, greater than 6 statute miles, B, it's not forecasted, or C, possibly 6 statute miles. Give everyone just another moment on that one. All right, pretty much a split class here, 41% with A, 54% with C. Correct answer here is actually going to be A. Where people are getting a little bit confused is the P, right? What does the P mean? So first thing is we're going to go down and look at Oklahoma City, and we need to figure out the forecast period from 0600 Zulu to 0800 Zulu. So if we were to read through all of this, let's see if we can find it, which is basically the last one here. It's becoming from 0600 Zulu to 0800 Zulu. And it's, oops, wrong one. Go a little bit lower than that. The plus, it's basically plus or greater than 6 statute miles. That's what the P is. It's not a possibly. Anytime we have the P, just think of it as a plus sign. So it's greater than 6 statute miles. All right. All right, final FAA test question here, and then we'll wrap it up. So this is going to be what type of clouds are forecasted in the TAF, and they want you to refer basically back to a TAF in case you want to look at it for whatever reason. But what are the only cloud types forecasted in TAF reports? Is it nimbostratus, cumulonimbus, or scattered cumulus? Yeah, the plus, unfortunately, would be a modifier, and the modifier would mean heavy 6 statute miles. So the plus, I don't think is going to work. Come on, 100%, 100%. We've talked about this one a few times, everybody. That works as well. Greater than. All right, so correct answer here is actually going to be B. So remember, we got about 91% of folks with the correct answer. Any type of cloud is going to be reported as a cumulonimbus, which you're going to see as a CB. That's the only type of cloud that we have reported on any of the TAFs, and it's the same. We don't report anything else than cumulonimbus on TAFs and METARs, just because they're so potentially deadly, right? Because they're generally going to be associated with thunderstorms. That's the reason why we report those. All right, everyone. So with that, I hope you guys have a great weekend. If you guys have any questions about the course or any questions about anything else, I'll stick around for a little bit. You've got the mods, which seem like they're answering all your questions, so I appreciate it. Thanks again, Zaf, Tom, and Missy out there. But I appreciate you guys hanging out for 2 hours. I didn't really realize it'd be this long today, but hopefully that clears up some of the weather questions, and that also clears up some of the VOR stuff as well. The FAA exam that you want to take after this mark is the PAR. It's the Private Pilot Airplane. That's the official name of the exam. Alfonso, I'm still doing the 20-minute Zoom meetings. I actually did 4 this morning, and I've got 1 more this afternoon. Thanks again, Mark. Appreciate it. Thank you. Have a great weekend. Thanks again, Zaf. Thanks again, Missy. Thanks again. Commercial online course starts on the 29th of August, same time. I think it's 29th. That might have been a typo. I'll double check. It might be the 28th, which is a Friday. But it's going to run Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Thank you. Have a good weekend. For those of you, I will see on Monday. Acri, I was on there this morning. I didn't see you come up. Just try to make another reservation, Acri, if it didn't work, and I'll be happy to meet with you. Yeah, I need to do something fun for the rest of the day. Wings credits will be available at the end of the course, RD. So when do you have to contact? Random question, when do you have to contact approach and departure? So if you're at a larger airport, such as, a Bravo or Class Charlie, they're going to have you contact departure when you take off or approach on your way in. If you're at a place like Camarillo, which is a Class Delta, it's at your discretion if you want to talk with them or not talk with them to pick up any type of flight following or local area advisories. Sandeep is asking to shed some light on TSA clearance requirements and visas. The best person actually to talk to you about that is Zaf. He kind of knows the process, but in order to fly, if you're not a U.S. citizen and you intend to fly in the United States, you have to go through the TSA Alien Flight Program. And what that is you have to apply online, know which flight school you're basically going to be going to, go through the fingerprinting process and the background check and pay the $100, and that's effectively it. The visa section is a little bit more complicated, but I know Zaf has some more information than I do on that. Glad that helped, David. I hope that did. Absolutely, Kershawn. I'm going to send out the emails for those that want to upgrade, hopefully today, because I got it all done. So we'll do that. David, so I will take a look at question number 7. I think that was a typo that's in my list of ones to fix. So I don't think that was I'm going to copy that down real quick so I can take a look at that. VOR is tuned to the DME. What is the aircraft position from VOR DME? All right. Have a good one. Have a good weekend. 31st. Yep. Thank you. 31st is that one. Instrument is going to be after that. That's going to be in September. I believe it's the second week of September. It's on the 14th. If you guys need the instrument dates or anything like that, you can go immediately to the you can go either to our Facebook page where it's located, or you can go to our website, checkride-prep.com. It's just beneath the homepage. Yeah, Zaf, you can give me a call when we're done here. I'll call you. Prevalence of CR computers over E6Bs. So once again, E6Bs are probably more prevalent than the CR computers. See, you're welcome, Mark. Still messing up your questions. You mentioned something going to or from. So Jim, the statements that I mentioned in terms of if you're messing up the VOR questions, if we're going to a VOR, we always want a to indication. And if we're basically going away from that VOR, we want a from indication, if you just want to remember it that way. Thank you. Thank you. Fernando is saying, when they say fly runway heading, is that the ground track? Nope. We are always going to fly our heading in our airplane. They will see the ground track, and if they want us to correct, they might say, I need you to fly 090, and then they'll basically say, if they don't realize that there's wind happening, you'll start to drift. If they want you to, maybe do a correction, they may say, Cessna 1234, just confirm you're heading 090, and you're like, yep, absolutely heading 090. All right, well, just make a 10 degrees to the left course correction. This class, John, will be posted later this afternoon. I'll put it on the Facebook page, and I'll also put it in the class information as well. Thank you to all the mods. Instrument class date is going to start on, I believe it's the 14th. Don't hold me to it, but once again, you can check the website. Alien Flight Program. Yep, that's the official name, unfortunately, but Wings Credit, if you're interested in Wings Credit, Victor, very last day of class, I'll have a form that you can fill out, and then I have to submit it. Probably with the amount of people, I was trying to do it in like 48 hours, get them all out, but just due to the amount of people that we have in the private pilot class, I'm probably going to have to say 7 days to get all these done. Let's see here. When is the formal test scheduled for? So the formal test you schedule by yourself. You're going to usually go to the PSI company, which is going to, they're pretty much the ones that handle the official FAA test. So you can schedule it with them, and I'll give you all that information at the very end. All right. What does it take after we get our private pilot's license to fly out of the country? If you want to fly out of the country, Lauren, and you have a PPL, all you need is a radio operator's license for the airplane, and then a restricted RCC license. I think it's called RCC license, radio telephone operator's license for yourself, and then you're good to go. And then the biggest hurdle for flying out of the country is just make sure you have whatever insurance your insurance is available, either for the hull insurance for the aircraft or yourself if you need it. What does limited lifetime access mean? Theron, I have no clue what limited means. That's kind of a contradiction in itself. Lifetime access just means lifetime access, unless there's some type of there's probably a typo if it says limited. That's kind of a weird thing. All of our lifetime access is lifetime. Still messing up on the VOR. Okay, I think we got that, Jim. So once again, Jim, if you missed that again, the VOR, when we are going away from a VOR, have a from indication. When we are flying to the VOR, have a to indication. For the most part, we are just using E6Bs. We do not use CRs in this class. Under events, I'm not seeing the free instrument course under events on the Facebook page. I will double check it, Russ, but I could have sworn I put it on this is the way we organize everything here. The instrument class is starting on the 21st of September, and it will run from the 21st of September through the 16th of September. And if it's not on there, I'll make sure that it goes up, but could have sworn it was under events section. Okay. Yep, laser grade was bought out by PSI Santosh. So that is the same. The companies basically just merged, so it's all PSI now. Final test is on the final test is going to open at the end of next week. So the final test will open on the 14th, and then you have until the 19th to finish it. Unless you have lifetime access, then you can do it at any point in time. And as soon as you pass the test with an 80% or higher, there's a little Google Doc that you have to fill out, and that gets sent to me. And then I basically manually do all those certificates, and then I digitally send them to you through your email. So you'll have 2 certificates, a course completion certificate, and then you'll have the actual FAA written test endorsement. The test endorsement is what you want, that you want to print, and then you can take it to the testing center. So that's probably going to take me a couple days. Just first come, first serve is basically the way it's going to work. Just because there's quite a few people that kind of get piled in at once. Okay. If you want to make another appointment, ACRA, we can try it again. I can give you the link real quick here. Was it called Acuity, I think? ACE. If anybody wants to take advantage of it, you're more than welcome to. And I think I've got Jack here in a little bit. All right, here's the link for that, for the 20-minute thing. Does a ham radio license cover you for a radio telephone license? I do not believe so, Richard. And honestly, there's no exam for the radio telephone license. When I did it in the, what was it, the early 2000s, it was like 30 bucks. I think they charge like 70 bucks now. All you have to do is just pay for the license. It's no test or anything like that. Rochelle, if you have nothing better to do, you can always hang out with us for the commercial class. The commercial class is the first 2 days are a compressed private pilot class. So we go over airspace and a lot of the same things that we're covering here. Just we're going to do it a lot quicker because we're assuming you know that knowledge. And at that point, what will end up happening is then we get into a deeper dive of material for the private pilot. It's like a supersized private pilot, if you want to call it that. Okay. If you have nothing to do, you can do it, but it might be overwhelming, but you're more than welcome to sit in and check it out if you want. Great, Samuel, appreciate it. All right, so if you're trying to navigate to the quiz statistics, you can go to the YouTube, or YouTube, I guess that's what it's called. And if you go to our YouTube account, Checkride Prep, then we actually have a video on it. Let me see if I can find it real quick and I can give you the link. Don't want that. All right, so here is the link to check your test scores. You can watch this quick 5-minute tutorial that I made, and that'll help you navigate the quiz statistics. Do those looking only for wings credits need? Nope. If you're only doing the wings credits, you don't need to take the final exam. Just the fact that you showed up, I appreciate you guys and gals being here, and you get the wings credits. Once again, it'll probably take about a week to kind of go through them one by one and make sure that everybody was there. Tom, you can take the test as many times as you want. Every time you take the test, it's going to grab a new set of 60 questions, so the questions should not repeat. Did the test endorsement requirement change from printed to IACRA? The test endorsement is, you just need to have a copy of a test endorsement from an FAA instructor. The reason why I say printed out is it was never a requirement that it was printed to IACRA. IACRA is for the licensing component, right? If you are taking your Checkride, you have to fill out an IACRA application to take your Checkride, and also for any type of license. But your test endorsement is just a single thing that says, I certify someone has basically met the requirements and is ready to take the exam. So that's what that is. Okay. Let's see here. All right. Thank you. We'll cover where you go to take the test and what you can bring on the very last class, Jason. But once again, believe you can just go to, I'll put the link in there as well, if you want to find out where to go. And if you look at the test authorizations and all of that, it does tell you what you want to bring and not bring. So obviously, don't bring your cell phone. Leave all that stuff at home. You're going to need a government issued ID, proof of that you have your written test endorsement. You want to bring your E6B, your aviation plotter. Everything else will basically be provided to you. The radio operator's permit, Dan, does not expire. Is the final test free, Victor? Yes, it is. At least with us, the practice tests are free. You're going to have to pay to take the official FAA written test. I believe it's $100. Thanks again, RD. I sent the link in the thing, Victor. Let's see, do section tests change if you retake them? Yep, so the section tests, Candy, if you retake the sectional, the lessons, if you will, they don't change. Yeah, that's one that I basically provide all the test questions for. Ricardo, can we quickly review the intercept strategy for a CDI, that halving of the heading stuff? Okay, so if we're talking about intercepting, you can take half of the heading. So let's say that you are, let's see here. I don't really like it, honestly, but the further away that you are from a VOR, the more aggressive you need to be with your intercept angle, okay? That's number one. The closer you are to a VOR station, if I'm right on top of the VOR station, like right here, right, I will only turn about a degree right or left, and my needle will do a full scale deviation either way. So I need to make very, very small adjustments. I can send you that slide if you want, and that's kind of, I think that's going to be the easiest way. Okay, so let's see. We got segmented circle. Quickly review. Let's see what else there is. Yep, Dan, if you still have your permit from 75, it's still good. Nothing ever changes. Have a great one, Candy. Hopefully I'll see you here one of these days. Where do you get the radio license? So that is called a restricted radio telephone, and you get that from the FCC. So in order to do that, you can just go to this website, and then you're looking for the restricted radio telephone operators license. It's kind of a silly thing to get, but all airline pilots are required to have it. There's the link for you. The one that you're looking for to fly outside of the country is going to be that. That's what it's officially called. Russ, clicking interested won't actually work. I have not officially set up the landing page yet, but once the landing page is up, which will be up probably in another week or so, I'll make an announcement, and then you can actually sign up for the webinars that way. The interested is more of a thing that I think Facebook sends a reminder to. If you get the wings credits, you still have to take, you don't have to take the final. Wings credits or something different. All right, so Cezanne was asking, can you please explain the segmented circle for the wind cone? All right, so the segmented circle doesn't really matter how it works, but effectively all you have is, ooh, it's a really bad circle. You're gonna have a circle of some type. Still don't like that. You're gonna have a circle, okay? There's a nice circle. And we call it segmented because it's usually dashed around it. And from that point, then we will have these arms that will stick out in a variety of different directions. And the only thing that you need to know is that the arm that is basically sticking out, the initial portion of that arm, this is going to be the final. And then this one right here is going to be the base. Now, if the airplane is coming in, you can see that the way that this works is that the airplane comes in, and then it's basically going to be right traffic for this one. On this one, or actually left traffic for that one. On this one, it is right traffic because they're making right turns. Now, depending on where that tetrahedron is or whatever the windsock is, if you have, let's say, a wind, one of these guys that kind of looks like this, where it looks like the triangle, if you will, then remember it points in the direction of the wind. So in this case, if you have a tetrahedron, which will look something like this, then it tells you that the wind is actually coming from this direction where all these blue arrows are blowing. So in that case, remember that we always want to land into the wind. So in that case, what we're going to do is we want to make sure that we are selecting the correct runway, and the correct runway is going to be this one where it's right traffic, and we're going to land into the wind because the runway is basically right here, and those are your two options, okay? Hopefully that explains it a little bit. Are they both right traffic? I'm looking it upside down. Yeah, they are both right traffic. You're absolutely right, Thuron. Sorry about that. That's what happens when you work so much. It always looks kind of ass backwards, but that that is a right-hand turn as well. Yep, so both are right-hand traffic. So we don't want to do this one over here, the one on the right-hand side, just because you're going to be landing with a tailwind. We don't want to land with a tailwind. We want to land on the opposite side. Yep, you're welcome. Thank you, everybody. I make mistakes too. All right, does anybody else have any more questions? If I don't answer them, like I said, I'll be hanging out on Facebook as well in the Facebook group. So I'll post a message and you can always message me. And then I've got to work on some more of these emails to get back to you guys and gals. Next course is Commercial Pilot, 29th of, or not 29th, I keep saying 29th. It's the last day of August. It's the 31st of August, which is a Monday. All right, how can you review how to enter the pattern when approaching from the wrong side of the pattern? Wrong side of the pattern. All right, so if we have a runway, so this is going to be our runway, little tiny lines indicating the runway, right? And our goal is we want to land where the X is, right? That's going to be the direction that we're going to be traveling. And our, let's say the normal traffic pattern is going to look something like this. So I'm going to say it's left traffic, which is pretty standard. So there's our downwind. Then we have a base leg, and then we have a final. Okay, so that would be what would be considered normal. Now, in this case, let's assume our airplane is somewhere, let's say it's coming in from over here. Okay, so that's not really perfectly going to enter the traffic pattern. Ideally, what we would do if we're coming in from the opposing side is we could overfly the field at 500 feet, just like that, and then basically descend to traffic pattern altitude. That's one option that we can have, all right? So and this is assuming we're at an untowered field. The other thing that we can do is we can basically do a figure 8 and basically overfly the field and then kind of come in. It's going to kind of look weird, but this is kind of a teardrop entry where it is, that is supposed to be representative of a teardrop. So that's another way we can do it. The other way that we can also do it, and the preferable way, is if our airplane was starting over here, all we would do is we would enter on the 45 and then we would continue in the downwind. The X normally would mean that the runway is closed, but Dan, I'm not very good with the mouse to draw the runway numbers. So I will say runway open 26. Okay, so there's that. X's normally do mean that a runway is closed, but I can't draw 26 sideways. Sorry, guys. But those would be the 3 different ways that you can enter. Now, if this is a towered field, most likely if you're coming into Camarillo, what would end up happening is if you were in that position that I basically showed you earlier, so if you're coming over here, usually what would end up happening is they would just tell you to make a straight in for the runway. And, you know, if you're in a towered situation, you're going to do whatever they tell you to do. The other option is that they could have you enter right traffic 45. So that's another option. So if you hear that, that's one that most people kind of screw up. You're going to basically continue, and then you're going to kind of make your turn, and that's going to be your 45-degree entry. And then you're on the downwind, base, and then final. So that would be where you can basically do that, okay? If the X is on there, Victor, it's a closed runway, just like Dan said, so you can't land on a closed runway. Traffic patterns do not apply to the ILSs. So when we're doing an ILS, we're obviously always making a straight in approach. In fact, if you were to look at any instrument approach, all it is it's a giant traffic pattern in the sky. All we do is we kind of shrink everything. So if that is our runway right there, and we've got our little runway right there, all it is a giant freaking traffic pattern, and that is all it is, except our traffic pattern is much, much larger, right? That final is like 10 miles instead of being like a mile or 2 miles. So when you look at the instrument approaches, they're always pretty much from a straight in, and they're generally going to make some type of T or something like that, okay? So like it'll look like different types, depending on where you're coming from. That's how it kind of is designed, okay? Santosh asked the question a little while ago. Tetrahedron can also be manually placed by the airport. It can absolutely be manually placed. So if it is at a towered field, they can actually lock it in place to basically show which way they want you to land at that point. Plus, tetrahedrons and wind tees, they're not the most accurate, so keep that in mind. The most accurate is actually just going to be the windsock itself, okay? All right, Victor's asking what the heck is wings credits. So wings credits is a way that you can basically stay engaged within the aviation community. And what it allows you to do is if you get X amount of credits, it allows you to bypass your flight review. Remember, we need a flight review every 24 calendar months. So if you get enough wings credits, which is a combination of either taking lectures like these online or in person, and also doing flights, then you don't have to sit with a certified flight instructor to get your sign off for your flight review every other year, okay? You always want to take off and land into the wind. Yep, so just remember that. That's going to be the big thing. You're going to want to figure out where the wind is coming from. For the most part, wherever it's coming from, even if it's coming from an angle, you want to take off and land into the wind. You don't want to go the opposing direction. We don't want to take off with a tailwind. So going this way is going to be not really work for us because tailwinds actually kind of push our tail up and our nose down to the ground, and that's going to put us into a dangerous position. Most airlines out there, like the 777 is pretty much the only one that I know that can do 15 knots of tailwind as their max, and I think it's on the 200 and 300 ERs. But most airlines out there, at least in the US, our max tailwind limitation is going to be 10 knots. So anytime it's greater than 10 knots, the airport needs to flip the runway, or we're going to be circling or looking for another airport at that point because that's beyond our limitation. All right. All right. You're welcome, Victor. All right, folks, I'm going to go ahead and wrap everything up. I hope you guys and gals have a fantastic weekend for the 50 of you. I will talk with Zaf here in just a moment. But other than that, have a great one. Like I said, I'll be on Facebook for the rest of it. And you guys have a great one on Monday for the private pilot students. We are going to be covering performance and the rest of weather. And then in addition to that, I'll leave the chat open for just a few more minutes so you guys can conclude. All right. Have a good one, everybody. Take care.